What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking Jets with Tigo. My name is Tigo, and today we're going to be going over the needs for the New York Jets this offseason. Why are we starting with this video? Well, I've actually just finished watching all of the prospects that I've wanted to watch, the top 10, 12 guys at every single position on the football field, give or take a couple that I didn't really go super deep on because we don't have a need at those positions, which is what we're going to be going over. But I have watched a little over 200 prospects, filled my notebook with just pages and pages of conversation and content and information about these players, my likes, my dislikes, my fits, my don't fits, everything like that. And we're going to be going over those lists and those rankings over the next couple of weeks. But before we talk about those things, we have to talk about the New York Jets, and we have to talk about what are their needs. There are 20-ish positions on a football field on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And the New York Jets don't have needs at all of them. So today we're going to be talking about what positions we don't have a need at, what positions we do have a need at, and how do we address that position? Is it in free agency or is it through the draft? And starting to build our off-season identity, our off-season plan. Let's hop right into it. Like I said, I broke down every position and then ranked them and kind of like, not ranked them, but like, do we need this? Do we not need this? Are we good? Are we not good? And everything like that. And we have to start with a position that we absolutely have no need at. We don't need to draft anybody. We don't need to bring anybody in free agency. The guys that we have on the roster, we should just bring them back and re-sign those guys because this room is elite. And that is our running back room. You're telling me a 1, 2, 3 going into next year who are already on contracts of Breece Hall, Zonovan Knight, and Michael Carter is insane. And the fact that we are more than likely going to be bringing James Robinson back and Ty Johnson back only gives us a super deadly 1, 2, 3 in the running back room, and depth in case of injury, because you got to have to account for injury. That's why we have backups. I don't think we have a need there. And that's it. Another position that I don't think we have a need at is wide receiver. I don't see the New York Jets going out and bringing in a wide receiver in free agency or bringing in a wide receiver through the draft. Now, that's not saying that we don't bring a guy on a vet minimum or something like that to compete for the 5th wide receiver spot. But when you look at our top 4, I think we're set. And I am of the thought process that I think we're cutting Corey Davis this offseason to save the money against the cap. A 1, 2, 3, 4 of Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims, and Braxton Berrios gives you the ability to have 2 really, really big and good receivers on the outside, depth at the slot wide receiver position, and just versatility across that 3 or 4, depending on how wide you go, wide receivers that you can put on the field, because all of those guys can play every single position. They can play the X, they can play the Y, they can play the Z, they can play in the slot. They can do it all with all 4 of those guys. So it won't really matter if, Jeff Smith is wide receiver 5, or if it's Rodney Adams, or if it's Irvin Charles, or whoever it is. We don't need to worry about the depth of the wide receivers super much because the 4 guys that I've mentioned stay healthy throughout the year and don't really miss games, unlike Corey Davis. Next position that I absolutely don't think we have a need at and probably don't even touch, tight end. We've got 4 tight ends on the roster. Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzama, Jeremy Ruckert, Kenny Aboa. These guys are solid. They do a great job. There's going to be no reason for us at all to go and address this position in the draft or in free agency, and I don't see us cutting anyone. And in that same conversation goes fullback because they kind of share a room, right? And Nick Bawden's coming back. Another room that I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that I'm putting on this list is defensive end. I don't think we really need an edge rusher. I think we're going to be cutting Carl Lawson, but I think that ultimately the guys that are on the team now are the guys that are going to be around next year. I think Jermaine Johnson has earned the right to step up as a number 1 edge rusher alongside Jonathan Franklin Myers. Michael Clemens has absolutely earned the right to get more snap counts, as well as Bryce Huff, who are, in my opinion, are both going to be back on the team next year. Bradley Anai is probably going to get promoted to that Vinny Curry role at the back end. So I don't really see us going out and getting a high-end, high-named defensive end. Now, if in the 6th round we draft some guy, I wouldn't be surprised, because the 6th and 7th rounds are kind of, who knows what these guys are. But I don't think we're going to get a name that everyone's going to be like, oh my gosh, look at that. Same goes for strong safety. I know that a lot of people are not Jordan Whitehead fans, and I get it. And I watched the tape and I've seen the games. He hasn't been good. That being said, I don't think we move on from him, because the options out there aren't great. And how much of his bad play was himself versus bad linebacker play or bad free safety play or something along those lines? We'll have to see. He's only got one more year on his contract, so it's one more year of him anyway. And we've got guys like Ashton Davis in the wings getting ready to fill that strong safety spot. And I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fan of Ashton Davis, but he is there. He can play the role. And then the last two positions are obviously corner. I think we are more than good at corner. And then obviously special teams, long snapper. Thomas Hennessy is that dude. And that's it. So let's go over needs. What does this team need? Who do we need to bring in? Why do we need to bring this position in and all of that stuff? Let's have that conversation. I think the biggest need that everybody's going to look at and everybody's going to agree with is quarterback. We have a massive, massive need at quarterback. We did not get top 25 play from any of our quarterbacks at any point in the season at all. We played 4 different guys under center throughout 17 games and somehow was able to win 7 games and have a 1,000-yard receiver. That being said, we can get better at quarterback, and I think we all agree that the best way to go about this is not through the draft, but through free agency, and that's the way I think we go. So we're probably not going to be covering the quarterbacks in this draft anytime soon, because we're going to focus on the positions that we will probably address in the draft. Which leads me to these next 3 positions, which is all 3 offensive line spots. The tackle, the guard, and the center. Because they all have a massive question mark on them. Are they really a need? Outside of the fact that we don't have a center on the team, you could argue that we don't need a tackle and a guard. And I would listen to that argument, and I would get it, and I would digest the information, and I would respectfully disagree. But the reason that they both have really big question marks on it is because we've got question marks at those positions. And what do I mean by that? Well, the tackle, right now, we've got 3-4 tackles on the roster, 5 tackles on the roster going into next year. We have Mekhi Becton. We have Max Mitchell. We have Laken Tomlinson, Dwayne Brown. We have Cedric Ogbehi. We have, what's the other guy? Mike Remmers. Those guys are all, I'm almost positive, on the roster next year. Are those guys that you can rely on to be starting tackles? That's the biggest question. I don't think so, and I think the New York Jets need to address the tackle spot in the draft. But the other question, and this is why there's a question mark on the tackle spot, is, well, Elijah Vera-Tucker is counted as a guard. What if Elijah Vera-Tucker plays one of the tackle spots? Then you don't need to take a tackle. Well, if you did that, you would still need to take a guard in the draft, because we don't have 2 starting guards on the team right now. You can't trust Laken Tomlinson with the level of play that he gave us last year. Yes, you have Dr. Blocker and Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, and he did great for us, not this past year, but the year before, and that was a good year from him, but he's not really a starting caliber guy. I love Nate Herbig, but he's a free agent, and you don't know if he's going to be coming back. And is Nate Herbig good enough to be a starting guard? The tackle and the guard position are tied at the hip, and they're conjoined, and the biggest reason for that is Elijah Vera-Tucker. What does he play next year? Is he a tackle or is he a guard? And the New York Jets and whoever the new offensive coordinator need to come up with that plan as soon as possible, because it's very important for us to have clarity on what to do moving forward. Next position is we're switching over to the defensive side of the ball, and no matter what happens with tackle or guard, I think the way that you address that is through the draft, not through free agency. And then center, I'd be okay with either one before we move on. I'd be okay if we bring back a Connor McGovern, if we go out and get a Bozeman or something along those lines in free agency. But I'm also cool if we say, you know what, we're going to take a center in the 2nd round and have him plug and play and be a starter. immediately. So that's the offensive side of the ball. Now let's look at the defense, because we do have holes on defense. I think for me, the biggest hole on defense is free safety, and that's because we just don't have a player that can play free safety right now. Now, a lot of people are going to look at that and say Tony Adams can probably fill that spot, and you know what? I would listen to that conversation. And I think ultimately he is the starter next year. But you can't totally, outside of Tony Adams, who's going to play free safety? Because LaMarcus Joyner isn't coming back. He's going to retire. There's a lot of questions there that you have to ask. You have to ask yourself what's going to happen there. So free safety, I think, and I would like for us to go out and get a big name free safety. I think, and I've worked the cap structure, and I know that we can sign our entire rookie class, bring in a $30 million quarterback, and still sign a bunch of free agents and have enough money to really make one big splash. And I think that splash, that $10 million player that we can bring in to impact the team immediately, could be at free safety. So there you go. I think free safety should be addressed in free agency, because I think ultimately the plan is that Tony Adams will be the starter long term. Now let's talk about the linebackers. The linebackers are a position that I would not only like to address in free agency, but also in the draft. They should be addressed in both, whether that's bringing back the guys that are unsigned in your Quan Alexanders, bringing back your Quincy Williams, bringing back those guys. But I would also love to be able to draft a replacement for some of these guys in the later parts of the draft. In rounds 4, 5, and 6, you can get solid linebackers who can come in and start immediately. My favorite example of that is Malcolm Rodriguez, who currently is with the Detroit Lions. In my mock drafts last offseason, I took him every time in the 6th round. And he has become one of the better middle linebackers in the NFL, and he was taken in the 6th round. And there he is in Detroit. Feels good to be proven right with something like that. So linebacker is a position that no matter what, we need to fix, but it doesn't need to be through free agency, and it doesn't need to be through the draft. It can be a combination of the both. And then last but not least, and this is an interesting one, is defensive tackle. I think no matter what, we need to bring in defensive tackles. Now, I don't like this defensive tackle class. And what I mean by I don't like it is it's not deep. There's 3 guys that are worth it, really. Maybe 4. And that's it. Everyone else is garbage. And so you might need to do a combo of how high do you draft a defensive tackle? Do you take a DT in the 2nd round, where the last one who's going to be worth anything is going to be available? Do you skip out on DT in the draft because you have to address bigger needs in the rounds 1, 2, and 3, and so you go in free agency? There are a lot of options at the defensive tackle, but we definitely need to bring somebody in. And then the last 2 special teams positions. Place kicker, I think you just bring back Zerline. Technically, he's not on the team, but it is absolutely a need. I think you just bring back Greg DeLeg. And then punter, I don't care. I don't care how you fix punter, but you need a punter. Bring in a new punter. You cannot rely on Braden Mann at all. You should not be on this team next year at all. Go find somebody and bring them on to take his job. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below of my lists of needs. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What position do you think is a need, and how do you think we should address it? Let me know in the comment section below. And last but not least, go Jets.